In the cycle of readings that many churches follow, known as the lectionary, the Sunday after Easter always tells the story of Thomas. Thomas, who wasn't in the room when Jesus first appeared to his disciples. Thomas, who said, "I'm not going to believe it unless I see it." Thomas, whose story is told with the story of the resurrection to all who weren't present to see it for themselves. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe. In this story, we hear a clear instruction that blessing comes to those who can believe. But believe what? Believe who? Believe how? Believe when? We've just passed April Fool's Day, a day when we are coerced, tricked, invited to believe a whole lot of unbelievable things. So Burger King marketed a new dessert chocolate Whopper with candied blood oranges and raspberry syrup. Coming soon, maybe. And Lego promoted their new vacuum that not only picks it up, but sorts the Lego bricks. If that's not true, which it isn't, sadly, every person who has ever stepped on a piece of Lego really wishes it was. Dairyland introduced a substitute for soda pop, sparkling milk. From a remote control in sock form to a smart shoe phone, from a diploma in human survival to which you can subscribe for 6.5 Bitcoin or 12 untainted potatoes, to a DNA test to help you choose your Lexus. You just lick the steering wheel. This April Fool's was full of surprising ideas that were just so crazy that they just might work. I confess to you all that I did actually consider for a second the news item that said the BC government might be moving the capital from Victoria to Vancouver. And Thomas is exactly the kind of realist you need for April Fool's Day. For when his heartbroken friends tell him that their nightmare doesn't have to be true, Thomas is the one asking them not to live in denial. Oh, my friends, I know you'd like it to be true, but you've got to accept what's happening here. Jesus is not coming back. Thomas is the resilient one who prefers to deal with circumstances as they truly are. And now that I think about it, Thomas is exactly the kind of realist we need to help us navigate more than just April Fool's Day, because we live in a world where it is very hard to know what is real and what isn't, who to trust, and what we can believe in. The current president of the United States coined the phrase fake news to discredit the most trusted information source in the world at the time, the news media. And that same president admits to making things up as he goes along and treating them as fact, whether or not they have evidence. And he has convinced a whole lot of people in this world that he is right about that. North of the border in our own country, the new leader of the Ontario Conservative Party has also adopted a similar pattern of discrediting the media whenever he is faced with an unpopular story about himself, trusting that people will simply believe whatever he says because he says it. I don't have that problem with children, clearly. But we live in a time when what you knew you could take for granted, you no longer can. While the scientific expert consensus on human-caused global warming is somewhere around 97%, the general public believes that there is no scientific consensus around climate change. All kinds of things get shared on Facebook and other social media platforms as if they were true because they show up on the screen. But no, Sweden did not ban Christmas lights to avoid angering Muslims. No, you cannot contract Ebola from your iPhone. No, there was not a salt shortage in India in 2016. And no, you can't win 2 free airline tickets by taking this quiz or sharing this post. Indeed, then, it seems that Thomas has the only answer for how to navigate this world. Don't believe it. And yet, humanity has this longing for belief in something beyond the heartache of the moment. In these moments when teenagers can die in bus crashes, there is a longing for meaning. There is a deep longing to be connected to something bigger than ourselves. Do you know it's the scientists who are now talking about the importance of making room for mystery? Because they keep discovering that there is something more than physical matter, the stuff, and energy. To be fair to Thomas, he wasn't someone who didn't believe anything. He, like we, was engaged in the difficult dilemma about what and who to trust. I think it is an important question of our time. A few years ago, I was fortunate enough to go and hear the late Phyllis Tickle talk about her study of church history and the implications for what she called the emerging church. And she said that every 500 years or so, the world asks a similar question, uses different words every time. But the question is, where is your authority? In other words, who are you going to trust or believe? Who crowns the king? Who's the banker? Who tells us what is right and what is wrong? And so then, counting back from the 21st century in 500-year intervals or so, she shows how the question was posed during the Great Reformation of the 16th century, the Great Schism of the 11th century, Gregory the Great and the monasticism of the 6th century, and the Great Transformation at the time of Jesus. And so, for example, 500 years ago or so, who you trusted to tell you the truth about the meaning of life was the Roman Church. But trust in the church's rules was being chipped away, little by little, and was symbolized by Martin Luther pinning his parchment to the church door. His contention was that the church was no longer trustworthy and that the Bible should be the authority rather than the Roman Church. Sola scriptura, he said, scripture alone. But over the last century, during the development of science and reason, the age of enlightenment, biblical, literary, historical criticism, the modern and the postmodern eras, trust in the Bible to have all the right rules, particularly for our modern world, has been chipped away. So now we are saying, don't believe it just because you read it. And we are asking again, who do we trust? To what or who shall we give the authority of truth? And the problem of being in the middle of this shift is that we can't really know the depth and the breadth of the answer that's going to emerge. But to those who are paying attention to these questions, it has something to do with navigating words like spirit, charisma, mystery. Think about our world and which politicians are finding popularity. They're charismatic leaders, aren't they? Ones who have the spirit that surrounds them or surrounds their movement, no matter what edge of the political spectrum you're on. They don't really have to make logical sense, because mystery doesn't have to make sense, at least not the way we've thought making sense in the past. And I think we are currently in a time when people are testing their trust of all these kinds of leaders, when they're trying to sort out how to make room for mystery. And I think, as we are proving, we're going to get it wrong as many times as we get it right these days, because we're still trying to sort it all out. Which is why I think we still need Thomas. Thomas, who understood that for most of us, there is no quick fix for our despair. Who understood that when someone offers us certainty and a quick fix, we would do well to question and wrestle and doubt, to test what we hear against our own experience. Thomas, who showed us that doubt doesn't need to leave us completely without faith, without things to believe. But Thomas, who showed us that it's okay to need personal experience in order to trust. It's okay to have to see the Ritz cracker inside the Cheerios box. Thomas doesn't answer the questions we are asking in our world right now, nor does Jesus. But as we continue to ask these questions, I notice two things about Jesus' encounter with Thomas that I'm going to hold on to day by day as I try to determine who and what I'm going to give my trust. I notice first that Jesus honors Thomas's skepticism. God knows we need personal experience to build trust. It's part of how we're built. So Thomas, and I note all of his friends in that room, have experiences that help them know that they can expand the understanding of what they thought was real. And I also suspect that for most, if not all of us, our faith is born or confirmed or built out of personal experiences of God alive in the world. Those moments that we cannot exactly explain, but that push us to trust that there is something more than we can simply hear or taste or see or touch. Which is why that Jesus, I think, pushes Thomas to remember that if we trust only our experience, we also limit our lives. There are blessings for those who are willing to trust, even if they can't experience it themselves. I know that if I live a suspicious and skeptical life because I am afraid of being hurt or being had, I close a lot of doors to myself. I close off a lot of myself, and my world becomes smaller and poorer. In this world of vast, vast information, knowing there is no way that anyone can be an expert on everything, if I bring my little bit of experience to the table and open myself to other people's little bits of experience, perhaps we may find common understandings that will help us experience the blessing of living in mystery. I need to learn that trust, not certainty, is the goal. That's part of the value of mystery as an authority. When someone is too certain, I think they are not to be trusted. And yes, being willing to trust might mean that sometimes I feel a little foolish when I go looking for the Lego vacuum or the sparkling milk. But so what? Must that diminish me? I don't think so. And yes, sometimes my feelings will get hurt, but pain and joy are a bit of a package deal. And if I can let go of my certainties and be more willing to trust, I may discover that there are ways for my world to expand beyond my limitations. I may start to see God working in ways I couldn't have imagined. As the scientist Albert Einstein said, there are two ways to live. You can live as if nothing is a miracle, or you can live as if everything is a miracle. And to do that will take some trusting. For now, if I can trust that I am not alone in the wondering, perhaps even that is enough. Thanks be to God. Amen.